I want to begin by saying that our political system might be thought of as a dual system. Now, we have two political systems involved. The first one is composed of the relatively visible system of elections, political personalities, public pronouncements, image engineering, and that handful of issues that bestir the government and actually catch the myopic vision of the news media from time to time. This system is taught in the schools, it's dissected by academics, and it's gossiped about by news pundits, and we sort of know it. It's what we call politics, government. Then there's also a system of state. That's a system that involves the financial structure of the political economy, the basic interests of finance capital, both domestic and international, and the linkage of state power to securing those basic interests, the needs of organized centers of wealth and economic power, as typified by the modern giant multinational corporation. This system is not taught in the schools. How many of you learned about that in Civics 101 or American Gov 101? It's not discussed in any critical detail in the media. Cokie Roberts and Daniel Shore seem never to have heard of it. William Buckley has heard of it, and in fact he's part of it, but he never mentions it because he's too preoccupied with the excessive power wielded by welfare mothers and the unemployed and the advocates of affirmative action. So he doesn't bother us with that. This dual system, I'm making here a conceptual distinction about what are really empirically overlapping phenomena. Obviously, in many cases, these things occupy the same place and the same dynamic, or parts of the same dynamic. This brings us to the distinction of what some Marxists have called the distinction between the government and the state. This is very relevant. And one of the relevant conceptual distinctions made is that between the government and the state. The government deals with interest group conflicts and popular demands. It provides the cloak and some of the substance of democratic rule. I don't want to say there's no democracy. Some of the substance, there is some democracy in this society. But whatever little democracy we have is something that we fought for and we got by our organized actions, by generations of struggles. We had to extract that from the people who had power and property. And there's always that antagonism. Democracy is a wonderful invention by the people of history to defend themselves from the powers of wealth and property. That's what democracy is. And the state has some of the substance of democratic rule. I mean the government. The state is something else. The state is the mechanism of final control, of class control. Max Weber, the great German sociologist, who is not a Marxist, anti-Marxist, in fact, he says the state's essential trait, its irreducible feature, is that it has a monopoly over the uses of legitimate force and violence. Over the legitimate uses. Legitimate force meaning legally sanctioned, authorized by the legally constituted authorities. That's what the state is about. Now, what is the significance of making this conceptual distinction? In good social science, you should never introduce distinctions unless they lead to empirical feedbacks. Much of social science doesn't do that. It does toxicology. It says, let's call this to this, to this, to this, to this, to that, and you memorize those 11 things and you get them on the exam at the end of the term. But what is the reason for that distinction? The reason is because it allows us to understand something. That taking office in government may not always guarantee full access to state power.